On today's special episode of Survival Dispatch News, we're continuing our discussion on recent events in Israel and what we can learn as far as protecting ourselves from terrorist attacks with Dr. Jennifer Stankus. And we're back with Dr. Jennifer Stanis. Welcome to the podcast, Jen.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Chris.
So this week we're running, a series of special episodes of Survival Dispatch News. We don't typically cover international news, and we're not really covering it this week in our special episodes. But our goal this week is to engage subject matter experts like yourself and see what we can learn from what's just happened in Israel to protect ourselves better as Americans. So before we jump right into that, for the people who haven't seen you on our podcasts and video podcasts before, give me a quick bio, Jen.
I'll try to be quick. So, my life in survival and that sort of thing started off at a young age. I've always taken an interest in this. I graduated from high school a couple of years early and started working with the sheriff's department. I trained with the SWAT team, did dispatch, went out on patrol, did everything that I could. At 18, I was doing investigations with what is now ICE in Hawaii as a freshman in college, and then interned with the U.S. Marshal Service. I was a police officer for several years in my early 20s. Ended up going to law school. I was also in the Naval Reserve starting at age 17 as a Navy medic and military police. And then went to law school, went into the Army as a JAG officer and military judge, and I'm now an emergency physician. So my whole life has been about kind of survival. I'm a little person. I'm 114 pounds, and I've always wanted to be self-sufficient and be able to protect myself. And so I took it upon myself to train myself and learn.
So actually 2 branches of military, correct? Not just Army.
Right. I have just one.
Yeah. So obviously you've seen a lot of stuff, and you've worked hard in your career to do whatever you can skills wise to balance the playing field against the bad guys. So before we carry on with like lessons learned and whatnot, what's your opinion of, and because you've military and law enforcement background, what's your opinion on how did this happen? Was this a massive intelligence failure? Or was it allowed to happen to galvanize, other countries and people to get into the fight, in your opinion?
That's a really difficult question to answer, obviously. This is just my opinion, but we know that Israel has one of the highest functioning intelligence systems, both domestically and abroad in the world. And they've had to, because they've been attacked so many times. This attack, which was both rockets that would overwhelm the Iron Dome system and infiltration into parts of the country near the Gaza Strip, where, who knows how many hostages were taken. The paratroopers coming in over the border and massacring people at the music festival. All of this took a great deal of coordination and time. It was done on a particular day. It's hard for me to imagine that this was just a massive intelligence failure. That's just my opinion.
Okay. The only reason I ask that is because I personally have been having this sense of deja vu over the Iraq situation, 20 years ago, where all the mainstream media and, the government were saying that we have these anonymous sources that tell us that they're weapons of mass destruction, and therefore we need to go in full force. And of course, that all turned out to be bullshit. And, so less than 24 hours after this attack started, you've got mainstream media organizations like the Wall Street Journal saying that they have anonymous sources and they go through this whole thing how a week prior the Iranians approved this attack and blah blah blah. So we didn't know any of this ahead of time, but all of a sudden in less than 24 hours we were able to uncover all of this. It doesn't pass the sniff test as far as I'm concerned.
Look, one of the greatest threat to Israel and frankly to us in the world is Iran. The fact that the current administration released any funds whatsoever, negotiated with this person, had this person come into our country and go to the UN building in New York, it's disgusting. This and you know, our leadership has been incredibly important in keeping things at bay. At present, we have zero leadership. I mean, we had Blinken calling for a ceasefire. A ceasefire? Would he call for a ceasefire on 9/11? Say, oh, well, that sucks. You know, we just lost a whole bunch of Americans. They attacked our homeland, but we'll just back off and just like let things simmer down. Bullshit. You go after the people who attacked you and you annihilate them. You kill, you destroy them. That is the only way to be safe.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you know, speaking of this administration, which that's a very deep rabbit hole that I, you know, usually willing to go down, but I know we have some time constraints today. You know, best low end estimate is that 40 million illegals have come into our country over the southern border since Joe Biden / Obama has been in office for his third term. The prospect that those are all good people is it doesn't exist, right? I mean,
right. And you know, when you talk to the very naive people saying, well, this is just, you know, this is humanitarian. We have people from Venezuela who are being oppressed who need to come here. Venezuela, how about the 159 other countries? And we're having our enemies come just walk straight through. And, you know, you and I were talking earlier about sleeper cells. They're not going to be sleeper cells for much longer. I mean, there are so many known terrorists in this country whose only purpose, their only focus is to destroy us. It's really scary. You have to have a secure border in order to have a secure country and a safe country. And I can't even imagine what the current administration is thinking. I just totally don't get it.
I have some theories on that, but I'll leave them for another discussion. This is a great jumping off point though. So, you know, it would be foolish to conclude that we don't have sleeper cells of, you know, terrorists from around the world who hate our guts. And they're here for one reason and one reason only, to inflict pain on us, much like 9/11. So once that's out of the way, the next step is, okay, well, what do we do as Americans to protect ourselves from this very unconventional type of warfare that terrorists engage in? So really, once again, is what can we learn from Israel down to the individual level or the family level, friends level? What can we learn to do a better job to protect ourselves?
You know, it's funny, the very first thing that I would say, and I would say that the very first principle of self-defense is to avoid the bad situation. I just had a big argument with my oldest stepson and daughter. He was really pissed off that his sister, who's a police officer, wouldn't go into downtown San Francisco on the train at night to watch a movie. He's like, well, I'm just not going to live my life that way. It's like, well, if you make that choice, you just have to know that you're putting yourself in harm's way. And so the very first principle is, where do you think these attacks are going to happen? Are you going to a place where you can't be armed, where, you know, the likelihood of an attack is high? I mean, basically, any soft target is high likelihood. So, you know, big concerts where there's metal detectors, you can't get in. They want to inflict maximum damage with minimal effort and the ability to get away. So you just have to think about, where are those places, and is it that important for you to go to those?
That's interesting, Jen. I mean, you're preaching the same stuff that our good friend Tony Blauer preaches all the time. I mean, the guy's in a league of his own when it comes to self-defense. And so he labels things D1, D2, D3, and I won't dive deep into it, but D1 says the best thing that you can do is recognize a dangerous situation, choose safety, and avoid it. That the best fight's the fight that doesn't happen, sort of thing. So it's not surprising that your opinion parallels Tony Blauer's. So let's use your stepson as an example. So they're going to be like myself and our family. We don't frequent those types of venues for this specific reason. But say somebody like your stepson decides to go to a concert. What kind of advice can you give people like that? Okay, if you're going to go to these gun-free zones where, you can't protect yourself with a gun, knife, or anything, what's kind of like the best practices for people who find themselves in concert venues and football games, that sort of thing?
So the first thing I would say is I totally get also the argument of, look, I want to live my life. I'm not going to live in a rabbit hole and not go out and not enjoy my life. And I mean, there's validity to that as well. Mm-hmm. So in striking the balance, what do you do? So, the first thing is that, we talk about situational awareness and people say you have to have your head on a swivel. That it's sort of ridiculous to think of it that way, because you can't be on like that, but you do have to train your mind to look for the unusual, look for something that looks out of place, someone not acting right, a car that's not supposed to be there, whatever. There's whatever it is, just train your brain. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I had so many warrant arrests as a police officer. It's like I just trained my brain to look for behavior that was out of the ordinary, or, whatever. And if you see something that's out of the ordinary, listen to your little voice and leave, go somewhere else, get away from that. Go ahead.
No, it's just like there's 2 points that I want to mention that are really germane to what the point you just made. Tony Blauer will tell you that, and I know you know this, in virtually every instance of somebody being assaulted, kidnapped, whatever the case may be, they say something didn't feel right. There was something, didn't look normal, but I ignored my instincts. And so he preaches what you're preaching. Pay attention to your instincts.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the next part to this is that security at Israeli airports is vastly different than the theater that we have going on here. Like we have TSA agents groping 80-year-old women. They're not the threat, but God forbid that we profile somebody who's more likely to, launch a terrorist attack. But in Israel, that's interesting, how you mentioned things like somebody not behaving in a normal manner. When you pull into an airport in Israel, they stop everybody and ask 2 questions, simple questions. What's your name and where are you going? And that trips up a lot of these bad guys. They stammer, they stumble. That's the first. Yeah, that's the first layer of protection. The next one is that their ticket agents are trained in observing body language. And the third part is that they have all kinds of undercover, officers watching for people's behavior as well. Like there's tells, right? There's people kind of broadcast when, they're doing shady things because they're nervous.
Yeah, it was funny. I remember I was 21 years old and my best friend growing up came and did a ride along with me. And I was just patrolling through a neighborhood and just something caught my eye. I don't even know what. I went back around the block and I looked and there was a guy sitting in a car. And I mean, that shouldn't trigger anything. It was a busy neighborhood. But there was just something not right. So, I contacted him. I found a reason for the contact and contacted him. He ended up having a warrant. He was stalking a woman across the street in an apartment complex. But it's like really just being in tune with that. And we really try to talk ourselves out of something because we want to be polite, because we're good people. We're nice people. You need to stop that. Stop feeling like you have to be polite, like you might offend someone. If someone is doing something that is threatening to you or something's making you nervous, the very first thing, and they're in that space where they can get to you and you don't like it, the very first thing you need to use is your mouth and be loud and be like, stop, get away from me. You're making me nervous, and put it on yourself. Like, whatever. But like, hey, like, you're in a parking lot in the grocery store or whatever. It's nighttime. You had to go shopping. You need to get food for your family, and someone is approaching you. Don't let them even get close before you start yelling at them and make a scene. And I'll tell you what, if you put yourself out there and you're not the hard target, they're not going to go after you. Or if you are the hard target, they're not going to go after you. They want the soft target. That's just nature. It's true with all animals.
So, an interesting aspect of that, and I mean, that's great advice, is that I know a local businessman who had several $100,000 embezzled from him by a very dishonest CFO. And when the local newspaper covered this, they made him look like a complete fool that was easily taken advantage of. And he's actually a pretty intelligent guy. He's not a friend, but an acquaintance. And his response to that was, I'm not a criminal. My mind doesn't think in criminal ways. So I didn't pick up on any of these red flags or cues because I just couldn't imagine somebody doing what this guy did. Now, I get that. But like you said, you've got to train your brain to pay attention. You got to trust your gut instinct.
And, and this is going to sound really sad because, and things still blow my mind because I am a good person and I think about other people in a positive way and I want to help people. I mean, that's been my whole life. But you have to realize that is not how everyone thinks, and that there are people out there who will not hesitate for 1 second to hurt you or take something from you or whatever, particularly if they have an agenda like these terrorist guys do. People think, well, they'll come here and they'll just see how wonderful it is. They see this as pure evil. They hate us. Yeah. They're here for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to hurt us and to kill us and to whatever it is that they're going to do. They're hell bent on doing it, and they don't care. There's not 1 ounce of empathy or compassion or anything in these people. They will hurt you, and so you need to protect yourself.
They're on a religious crusade.
Yeah, so, and they believe that they're right. That's the scary thing. It's like they really truly believe in their cause and they're willing to die for it. And in fact, they think that they're going to be rewarded in some cases for being violent and killing us.
Yeah, 72 virgins. So
you can't handle the 72.
Yeah. So first and foremost, really good advice. Pay attention to unusual behavior, unusual people doing unusual things, and you utilize that to avoid being on the X, for lack of a better term. What else? Like if people go to large music concerts, like what just happened in Israel in the southern part of the country, what else can people do to protect themselves or at least increase their chances of survival?
So the first thing that I would say is, wow, you remember the concert in Vegas?
Yeah.
I was supposed to be there. I was going to go to that. I ended up canceling the trip. I had a job interview there and decided to change that. And so I didn't go to that concert, but I think that concert is a really good example of how you can't predict where something's coming from, right? So there's a hotel across this highway basically that's shooting down at that concert. I mean, how likely is that to happen or to happen again? It's not highly likely, right? So there's no thing where you can say, okay, I'm going to train for this situation or that. What you have to train for is you have to train to be flexible and to think and to have an exit. So if you go to a concert, do you want to be right in the middle of the mosh pit where you will not be able to move or you'll get trampled if something happens? Or do you want to say, I'm at this concert, I'm going to enjoy myself, but I'm going to be in this place, and I know that there are exits here, here, there, and there. And depending on where something's coming from or where people are moving and I can't get through there, I have options. So for me, the biggest thing about self-defense and situational awareness is options. Okay, so you pull into a gas station and suddenly someone comes up right behind you and another car is coming this way. Are you going to stay there and wait until you get boxed in, or are you going to move? And I don't, and let's say that you do hit that car and you're wrong. Okay, you have some property damage, but what if you were right? And you avoided being killed or kidnapped or God knows what.
So again, what's interesting here is, I'm friends with Tony Blauer and I speak to him on a regular basis. You've never met the man before, haven't studied him, and virtually everything you're saying mirrors his advice, because in that situation, what he would say is choose safety. If something seems awry, trust your gut, go to another gas station. Don't stay there.
Right. And it's really interesting, just getting back to this notion of being too polite or, being I'm a rule follower. I was a cop.
Right.
I mean, I am, but you know what? If I'm sitting at a red light waiting to make a left turn and someone comes up to my car, I'm going to run that red light. I'm going to get out of there. I'm going to get off the X. And if I get pulled over, I have a pretty damn good reason for doing what I did, as long as you're not creating a danger to oncoming traffic or whatever. But the point is that no matter where you are, you have options. Just make it a game to yourself. What are my options here? If the other thing is, like, as an example, carjackings are up. I wanted to say 106% in DC, for example.
I saw that.
So how do you avoid being carjacked? Couple things. One is people are always like right on each other's butts.
Yeah.
I always keep extra space. If I need to make a turn out to go, like, think about where you are. Self-defense is about movement, right? Because distance is safety. So always think about, how would I be able to move from where I am? How do I get distance? How do I get safety? So that's kind of how I think about things. And I'm not paranoid. I'm not like, I'm a pretty mellow person, sort of, except when it comes to work. I mean, I'm kind of a spaz, but
Bob Seafield would disagree with you. It's one of the first comments he made to me with regards to you and being on Surviving Man was, holy cow, she's competitive.
A little bit.
That's awesome. It's one of the reasons we love you. So yeah, that's fantastic advice and like tangible things that people can do. What are your thoughts? I know, you're in Nevada, you're in Washington State. We've got different, gun laws, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on, people and their EDC choices?
Well, I've actually started strongly considering a Byrna, less lethal here in Washington. And the reason is that I also do a lot of work as an expert witness. And I know what the legal climate is. As an example, I can't even have self-defense insurance in Washington. USCCA won't even cover me. Won't cover me. Why? Yeah. Because the environment is so hostile. It's too, you don't think they'd take my money if they could? They won't, because it's too dangerous for them financially to try to cover anyone in the state. So, I think about, well, what are my options there? And again, your goal is to get away, right? I mean, there are so many people, so many trolls on the internet who are like, look, they're going to get a piece of lead. I don't care what happens to that person. Like, I hope that they get caught. I hope that and quite frankly, I hope that they pay a price in terms of a little bit of physical pain, because it's what teaches bullies and bad people. But I really don't care about them. I care about me. I care about my family. I care about my friends, and I care about being safe and uninjured and getting away. And so I have no problem whatsoever using a Burna. I have a Ballista Pack that Luan from Byrna gave me, and I should actually show it to you sometime. We can look at it, but you basically, I pull that thing over. I've got body armor. I've got my less lethal here. I've got my lethal here, and in a lot of cases, I would, at least in Washington, I would start, and outside the home, I would start with less lethal if possible. Someone pulls a gun, the game is over. Like you don't go lower force to deadly force. I don't know why you do that.
So, I mean, just to qualify things, like for some people who've never heard of Burna, for example, Burna doesn't pay you. Burna doesn't pay me. We don't even have an affiliate relationship with them.
No.
I personally feel like they're the leaders in less lethal products. And so I've been hit by their kinetic rounds on purpose for testing. Not a smart decision. Not a smart decision. And it took layers of skin off my back, literally. It's incredibly painful, but I like they've got other projectiles, and more, you've used their products even more than I have, that have, chemicals in them, pepper spray and whatnot, and you hit somebody in the chest, poof. I didn't volunteer for that, but I know somebody who did. And the following 8, 9, 10 hours was really, really rough. And being a physician, you would know.
Yeah. So the thing that's cool about that, so it's a powder, right? So when that projectile hits either the person or close to them, you can even miss. You hit the wall behind them, it disperses a 5-foot cloud of powder. And that powder can either be pepper or it can be a combination of CS and pepper. And the reason why that's important is one hits your airway really fast. The other one takes a minute to really take effect. But I'll tell you what, that max round with the CS and gas, that will incapacitate someone for about 45 minutes. And it's incredible.
So we'll throw some B-roll up in this video on the Ballista Pack, because as you know, Burna have a whole bunch of patents on it. It's tremendous intellectual property. And I'm not sure what happened. I don't know Lon as well as you do, but I do know him. He's a really just an awesome guy all around. So he's like the second in command at Burna for our audience. That Ballista Pack, that backpack that they call the Ballista Pack, looks like a kid's book bag, number one. So it really subscribes to the gray man principles. And number two has 2 panels in it. And like you said, one of which you can deploy by just reaching over your head. Now you got a front panel, rear panel. It's got MOLLE on it. So you could have a pistol or a Burna launcher, which is their version of a pistol. We've got video of Denny Chapman. And from the time he deployed the front panel, drew the Burna launcher and took a shot was a couple seconds. And it's a phenomenal tool. And I don't know what happened, but when John Wick 4 was released, about a week after that, Lon and I were talking, and he said, did you catch them using a backpack that was either the Ballista Pack or something similar? And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, we can't tell from the footage if they were using our product or if somebody violated our intellectual property. I don't know what came out of that. But if I had kids in school today, and I would not put my kids in public schools today, but if I did, every last one of them would have that Ballista Pack. That is an incredible piece of equipment.
So, we talk about, one of the things that we talked about earlier too, was that 2 things with soft targets. There are a lot of places that are, quote, gun-free zones. The first thing is that you should check and see are those legally enforceable? Now, from a legal standpoint, you are at higher risk if you deploy a deadly force in those areas, because it's just one more hump to overcome a jury, if you know what I mean. But you shouldn't ignore them, or you should ignore them if it's in your best interest for safety. So, go ahead.
Well, on this topic, I was just gonna ask you for your opinion. So the consensus, from I don't know, maybe call it the progressives amongst us, is that you should, run, duck, and hide. And we had the shooting at the nightclub in Orlando, not too far from us, not that many years ago, and everybody ran into the bathroom, got slaughtered.
Water.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get your opinion. So people find themselves at this venue that's a gun-free zone. They've got their head on a swivel. They're paying attention to people behaving strangely. They know what their exit options are. The shit hits the fan. What are your thoughts on this run, duck, and hide stuff?
I think it's bullshit. I mean, you should, sorry, but I mean, you should like get away if you can, but like, I'm not going into a funnel to a bathroom to just wait. Like, I really hope they don't come in and kill me, or to just sit there and watch people accentuate who were hit and can't get out and can't get to. So, the other thing though that you have to think about too is alcohol. I know that a lot of people like to go out and have fun, and if you are going to go out, there should be someone like a watch goose. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there should be someone who's paying attention, who can like pay attention for other people if you're going to do that. But I would say, my thinking has changed on this a whole lot. With pot, yeah, it's legal in a lot of places, but it dramatically changes your depth perception. Alcohol reduces your inhibitions to make, bad decisions or not pay attention or whatever. It's fine to go out and have fun, but what I would say is moderation is really important. And is, having 4 drinks more important than your life? I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, building on top of that, and especially and with your background in law enforcement, it's standard protocol that law enforcement officers are taught that if you get in an altercation, never stop fighting. If you give up, you're as good as dead. And some of the most disturbing content that I saw from this weekend out of Israel was people being kidnapped, and I didn't see any of them. It may have happened. I'm just saying the footage that I saw, I didn't see any of them resisting, being taken as hostage. We know from ISIS, Al Qaeda, the Taliban, Hamas, at this point, that they love to make a spectacle out of torturing and killing people on camera. They took people's cell phones. They've been calling their families to tell them all the horrible things that they've done to their, loved ones, sending them pictures, videos, all kinds of stuff. Myself, it doesn't matter if it's 1-on-1 or 10-on-1. I can't imagine just saying, okay, well, take me away, because the conclusion's foregone. You're going to be slaughtered.
So this gets exactly back to what we've been talking about. People are too nice and they want to believe good things in other people. Stop it. Just stop. This scenario is going to happen here. Or if you're overseas or whatever, you have to make the assumption if someone is coming after you, they are going to kill you. They're going to torture you. They're going to do bad things to you. Mm-hmm. And your job is to fight like a mofo. And I agree with you. Don't stop. You have to assume they're going to kill you. There's not this, oh, if I just comply and I just go along, everything will be okay. I'll be okay. No, like you got to get that out of your mind. They are here to hurt you, and they will. Can you imagine being that person just on your knees with the ISIS guy behind you with a sword, just waiting to decapitate you in front of the world? No way. I will go down, and the way my brain thinks is I want to hurt that person. I know it sounds really bad, but this is an evil, bad person. Like my job, if they come for me, my job is to fight back and because if they don't, if they do it to me, they're going to do it to other people too. And I just happen to be the person who's got the bad luck to have encountered this evil thing. And that it's been put in my lap, and it's my job to confront it.
Yeah. So, I mean, specific to this weekend and other situations, you mentioned options, consider what your options are. And, if you distill it down to the lowest common denominators, you've got fight, flight, or freeze. Every single person that I saw pretty much fell into that freeze category, with the exception of some people who had distance, which, as you pointed out, that's a great thing for safety. I think there were somewhere around 250 people who ran and hid in some sort of underground drainage system, at the music festival, and they ended up surviving. But, if you can't run because you're at point blank range and they're going to shoot you in the back, your best option is to fight, but it should never be to freeze.
Oh my gosh. And I'll just tell you from my experience that the freeze happens a lot. And why does it happen? It happens because the person doesn't know what to do, because they've never thought about it before. I really believe that most people can train themselves to make good decisions in bad situations, but you have to think about it in advance. If you haven't even thought about it and you don't run these scenarios, make it a game. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to, like, I don't like this fear mongering. I don't want people to live in fear, but I do want people to be prepared and to know what to do if something happens, or at least to do something if something happens. And to like, as soon as you stop and freeze, you're done. And so start training now. Start just making a game of it. Okay, I'm in this gas station. What if that guy came and approached me? What if the cars came in and boxed me in? Like, just thinking about, just think, like, what are my options? And then, if God forbid the time comes and you find yourself in a bad situation, your brain is already trained to think, well, I could do this, this, or this. And okay, this isn't going to work. I'm going to do this. There is no one size fits all, just like with the concert in Las Vegas. Like, God knows where these things are going to come from. So you have to have multiple options and just think, okay, if I hear gunfire and I'm here, what are my options?
So I'm going to give Tony Blauer another shameless plug. He doesn't pay us. We're not affiliates. Tony's a very unique individual when it comes to protecting yourself. And so I'll ask one of his questions. How many times in your life, Jenn, has something caught you by surprise and you flinched?
Gosh, I can't even.
A bunch.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's part of your autonomic, nervous system, right? So how many times, I mean, I kind of just gave away the answer, but how many times have you actually thought to yourself, oh, I should flinch?
Never.
Right. So it's an automatic reaction, essentially, right? So in the 90s, Tony, it dawned on him that we have these built-in mechanisms that we flinch. And he coined the term weaponize the flinch. So in other words, when something catches you off guard, recognizing the fact that you're going to flinch, how do you turn that flinch into defending yourself? And he's got all kinds of online training. Probably the most comprehensive would be the human weapon system. And it's really about weaponizing the flinch. And it's a 10-hour online deal. Like, there's 10 chapters. They're not each an hour long, but you could do one a day over 10 days and get through it quite easily. It's got nothing to do with martial arts or anything like that. And so here's the next question. And again, I'm shamelessly promoting him, but I'm doing it because his stuff works. Yeah. How many times have you got in your vehicle and put your seatbelt on in your lifetime?
Thousands.
Right. So your average person who hasn't studied martial arts, for example, if you were to say to them, do you know how to throw an elbow? Their response, if they're being truthful, will be no. And Tony's response is, you do this every time you get into the car. And it's now those neural pathways are burned. And he teaches you how to use that stuff as part of the startle flinch to defend yourself, and it's his perspective is so unique and so interesting when it comes to that. And yeah, he's a martial artist, but this is not martial arts that he's teaching. For example, you know, if we were face to face and I put my fist up like this, what is your thought process? What am I
Move
what
back.
yeah,
Move
but
back.
what am I getting ready to do?
You're about to hit me.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
So just one of these little things that he would preach. Okay, like you're very close to an assailant, and you go like this. The assailant now knows that you're going to take a swing at them. Don't do that. You know, you can be talking with your hands, whatever, palm them quickly. May not be as dangerous, or you know, not as much damage as a fist, but they won't see it coming the same way. So he speaks in terms of, you know, the cues that you're giving the bad guy, all sorts of stuff. And again, anybody can just search on Tony Blauer Human Weapon System. I think it's like $397, and it will teach people, you know, when the shit does hit the fan and they find themselves on the X in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is information that will save them. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. The Tony
Oh, no,
Blauer.
I think that's really great, because people need what people need is a way to think about things and to live their life. Like martial arts is, I mean, I took karate as a kid, and it's like these little forms that were totally useless, quite frankly. You know, there are no rules in fighting. There's no rules when someone is coming to get, like, this is a street fight is, you can be, you know, an MMA fighter and get your ass kicked by some scrappy little guy who is really good at street fighting, because there are no rules.
Right.
And it gets back to being polite again. There are no rules. Go for the eyes, go for the groin. Like anything that you can do to hurt that person, to get him away from you, that's what you should do. But people are like so afraid to do it. They're coming to hurt you. Like hit hard, and hit them hard enough to get them away from you and get away.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to like one of the first, pistol training courses that I took, you know, tactical pistol related stuff. And I've completely lost my train of thought. I don't have Alzheimer's, but I do have sometimes. Sometimes I remember and sometimes I forget. And I've been trying to diligently write stuff down, but I forgot to write my point down. So
So we were talking about just, you know, we're too polite. You need to hit hard, and hit something that is going to hurt and disable, like the eyes and the groin. And then you were talking about your first tactical pistol.
Thank you. So the instructor was a long time undercover agent for a local police force here. And he basically said, in this day and age, you have to assume that a bad guy is wearing body panels, body armor of some type. So the first thing you know, as we profess repeatedly, don't go for the headshot, because the chances that it'll kill your assailant are not really high. Like unless you hit them temple, eyes, you might blow their jaw off, but that's not going to stop them from coming at you with a gun or, you know, a knife or whatever the case may be. And so his advice was, you know, don't go for the headshot. And he actually showed some pictures. And ironically, one of the pictures he showed, a friend of mine, was the ER surgeon who treated this guy, was shot at point blank range with a 45 ACP between the eyes. His skull was about 3/4 of an inch thick. The projectile went under the skin, over his skull, and sat in the back of his neck. It was a simple incision, pulled it out. The guy's mug shot is him smiling ear to ear, with the entrance wound just being that, and that's a point blank range, right? So the advice from that particular officer was shoot for the groin. It's Premier Body Armor has some ballistic underwear, but I mean, you hit a femoral artery or a femoral vein, and you hit somebody in their equipment, they're done.
Yeah, it's game over. Yeah, it doesn't take much. Doesn't take too many heartbeats to bleed out of a big femoral injury.
Yeah. So, I mean, being a doctor, you know this better than anybody. My good friend Lane Kelly, who was a paramedic for many years, his comment on this is all bleeding stops eventually.
Yeah.
You either stop it with a tourniquet or you bleed out. Those are your choices, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
So before we wrap up, Jen, any last parting thoughts for our audience that, you know, if and when, you know, we have the next round of attacks domestically, as far as what they can do to prepare and protect themselves?
I want people to feel, my whole shtick is I want people to feel good and empowered, not afraid and paralyzed. So I think that your idea of going and doing the human weapon training is great. The most important thing in the world is paying attention. Stay off your phone. If you're in public and you're around other people, stay off your phone and see, you want to see what's all around you. If people are acting in a weird way, and just play this game with yourself. What are my options? What can I move? And so just, you have the power to protect yourself and avoid these things in most instances. And so take that power and use it and live your life.
Yeah, I think my comment pretty simple on this. Everything in life, the first thing you do is decide what you want. The next thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. So the unfortunate people who, you know, went peacefully with their captors this weekend in Israel have met a horrible fate. And, you know, they may have been killed if they fought back, but at least they would have gone down fighting and not just been been tortured and their family tortured and everything that goes with it.
I'd say one last thing. I know you got to run, but the last thing I would say is, if you find yourself in this situation, know that you are facing and confronting the most evil thing that you have ever seen, and it is your responsibility to fight that. And don't even hesitate. Don't feel bad. Not an ounce of any sympathy. You hit hard. Fight like hell, because if you don't, you're going to go down in a bad way. And for me, I'd rather go down fighting.
Likewise. Great advice, Jen. Once again, appreciate your time coming on the podcast. Appreciate your service, and look forward to the next time.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jen.